Sue Moroney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Finally, after all the delays and all the backwards and forwards, we are getting the opportunity to debate the Health and Safety Reform Bill in this House. And I do want to take just a few minutes at the beginning of this call to respond to some of the issues that the Minister himself has raised when he introduced the committee stages to Part 1, the debate on Part 1 of this bill. We had delays at the Select Committee, where the bill languished in our Select Committee for around about 5 or 6 weeks and went nowhere and did nothing. And today we find this document, this is the SOP put forward by the Minister, with a range of amendments and changes that the Select Committee could have been considering while it sat idle for 5 or 6 weeks, while the National Party sorted out its internal politics. It tried to sort out its divisions and its splits over this bill, because people might remember that there was some stuff going on with Judith Collins and some stuff going on with Maurice Williamson, and there were probably some of the other MPs from the rural areas. Now we find out that the delay that the Minister spoke about that had occurred over the last 24 hours turns out to be a delay so they could find a tricky way of getting farms and agriculture out of having decent representation over worker health and safety in their workplace. That's what it's turned out to be about, not anything honourable, Minister, not something that improves this legislation or improves worker representation over health and safety, but actually spending that 24 hours convincing their support parties that they should support a watering down that specifically allows agriculture not to be included in the ability for workers to require and have an elected health and safety rep at work. Agriculture, Minister. A third of the deaths in this country over the last 5 years in workplaces has come from agriculture, and that is the area that that government has spent the last 24 hours trying to find a tricky way of actually excluding from having the best worker health and safety representation model that can possibly be put in place. That, Minister, is a disgrace, and it's a shame. It's a shame because the Labor Party at the outset, at the first reading of this bill, did support it, because it was based on research and evidence, it was based on the recommendations from the Royal Commission, and we were pleased to see it go into Select Committee. But what happened thereafter was a travesty. As we watched the National Party start to crumble, we watched their knees tremble when some of their supporters came in and gave submissions. Mr Chair, point of order. Can I just ask what the order is there?
Absolutely. The member will sit down. The member was clearly implying a lack of courage on the part of government members, suggesting the knees tremble. I think the member knew she was doing it, and she will cease.
Thank you, and I apologise, Mr Chair. It was a genuine question. I didn't quite take it as that meaning, but we watched what happened with the National Party when their resolve crumbled over what they had gone into when the first reading of this bill, when they saw a small number of employers come in and try and sort of rort the process and get this watered down, and they have succeeded in doing that from the National Party's perspective. Mr Chair, through this debate will be taken very seriously by the Labor Party. As the acting spokesperson, I want to make it absolutely clear that this is a complex and complicated piece of legislation. We do intend to debate the detail, because that is the purpose of the committee stages debate, and we do intend, because there are a number of amendments that we wish to pursue, we do intend to be able to fully debate the implications, because nothing can be more serious in our view than the consequences of not getting this bill right, and we don't believe this bill is right. In front of me I have taonga, actually, that was given to me last evening here in Parliament from the many families who have suffered workplace deaths in their families. They've lost loved ones in forestry, in farming, in Pike River, in a range of different workplaces, and they wished this taonga to be present in the debating chamber when this debate took place. It might not always be in front of me. There's a lot of paperwork that goes on with this piece of legislation, but it will always be nearby. Mr. Chair.
Sue Moroney.
And I particularly want to acknowledge the family of Lincoln Kidd who had this box made up. It reads in loving memory of New Zealanders killed at work. Lincoln Kidd was killed in his workplace December 2013. He was killed in the forestry sector. The court case for the prosecution against his employer starts on Monday. And that's going to be a gruelling journey for his family as they face 3 weeks of court time, listening to what I imagine will be an employer trying to absolve themselves of things that they should be held accountable for, and that will be very difficult indeed. Mr. Chair, we do have an amendment coming forward in Part 1 of the Act, and I do intend to take some time to speak about that. But before I talk about that, I want to come back to the Purpose Clause, which is in Part 1, and draw the Minister's attention to 3(1)(b), because I think this is the crux of what the government hasn't got right yet. Providing, it says the main purpose for this Act is to provide for a balanced framework to secure the health and safety of workers and workplaces by, in B, providing for fair and effective workplace representation, consultation, cooperation and resolution of issues in relation to work, health and safety. Now what we all know, is that the best form of worker representation is when they elect from amongst themselves a health and safety rep, if that is their wish. And that is what we are asking for, Mr. Chair. We are asking for the government to honour that. Because when this legislation first went into Select Committee, it entailed that for every single worker. And now we are being reduced to arguing about who doesn't deserve to have access to worker representation on health and safety. That's what we're reduced to arguing about now, and that should never have been the case, because that party, the government, enjoyed the support of this entire Parliament when this piece of legislation went into Select Committee, and it is a great shame that coming out of Select Committee it no longer enjoys that support, because it should have. And it has sacrificed workers in small workplaces, and quite specifically those who work in our most dangerous sector of agriculture. And I would like the Minister to explain how he can justify that the biggest killer of workers in New Zealand is not going to be covered by the requirement for an employer to allow people to elect one of their own to represent them on health and safety, because I don't think he's going to be able to convince New Zealanders that that is right and that that is going to improve our health and safety statistics, because the largest driver of bad health and safety statistics is in fact agriculture, and that is the area that they have moved to exclude from that representation. Mr. Speaker, my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway, the spokesperson for this area for the Labour Party, in which I'm acting in his capacity, has put forward a very good supplementary order paper that actually promotes a change to the definition of officer. We want to make sure in Part 1 that there is an extension to people who hold the primary responsibility for health and safety. They may not be the PCBU, and that's going to be a phrase that we're going to hear over and over again in this debate, but they nonetheless are an officer that should have particular duties, and his amendment is brought forward in order to do that. There are many, many amendments that we're going to be debating through the course of the passage of this legislation. I really hope that the government will put politics aside, that they will put politics aside when it comes to addressing workplace health and safety, and see their way to actually support some of the amendments that are made by the Labour Party. Because I can tell the Minister now that the Labour Party will be supporting some of the amendments that he has put forward in his SOP. We will be supporting some of them because we will put politics aside for the sake of getting health and safety right in the workplace. We will put politics aside for that. Make no mistake. I want to see that coming from the other side as well. We have some very serious amendments that will make a difference. It will mean that we do have health and safety legislation that actually stands up to international scrutiny on what is correct.
Clayton Mitchell.